How are all y'all? Thumbs up, thumbs down. There's Oscar. Good, good. All right. Well, you guys, happy February. And apparently we're getting 6 more weeks of winter. Yeah. Oh, Jenny,
We watched it yesterday. I've never actually watched the ceremony. I couldn't think of
really?
anything that looked more like a cult than what I saw on TV. Top hats and code names all dressed in black. It was almost scary.
I think I've never watched it except in the Groundhog Day movie.
I felt
Yeah,
like Bill Murray watching it.
There's the
Yeah.
order of the groundhogs, and it's I've been asked to join. It's creepy. It's I know a couple guys in it, and they describe the ceremony to me. And that's local. That's like they meet at the Mystic Hilton and stuff. It's none for me, thanks.
Todd,
I've been out there. It's in the middle of Amish country. Punxsutawney Phil has this like little condo built into a side of the building with glass windows, so you can go see him anytime you want. He's like, his little condo is built into like the side of the town hall there. And then all through the town, you know how like we have like whales around here? They have groundhogs all decorated all through the town that you can go find.
Wow.
But that little groundhog
Well,
was
Todd,
life a luxury.
in another session, we could probe the reasons that you decided to watch that ceremony.
It was forced upon me by my family, and I had to actually color in a groundhog hat and wear it while we were watching it. So it was very cultish in my house too.
Oh, well, that sounds fun.
Are you okay?
I'm still recovering.
Well, so last time we got together, we had a conversation about feeling right and the trap that we can fall into in feeling right. And of course, I'm dying to hear from you guys. Has anybody had that experience over this last month? Anybody catch yourself feeling right about anything?
We have a project down in Louisiana, and they owe us a very sizable amount of money, and it's, getting the money out of them and just trying to negotiate with them has been a real struggle. And as I was reviewing the question, the thing that kept sticking in my mind was, how can I be wrong? Mm-hmm. And I came to the conclusion that my strategy follows my interpretation of the story. And so I, especially over the last few days, I'm working with some attorneys to kind of come up with a different strategy. And, what I found in the past is usually in negotiations and, even general discussions or whatever, if somebody is, really set on the story or it has a lot to do with their insecurities in the situation rather than their securities. We always think we're fighting their strength. Mm-hmm. But, as I go through this, I've kind of had to realign myself to say, let's say they're being this disruptive and whatever because of an insecurity rather than a security. And it's really kind of changed the way I've, been looking at it and trying to figure out, how can I support maybe building them up rather than tearing them down. So it's really been a kind of an interesting negotiation for me.
Well, I think today's session hopefully will add to that and maybe give you even more ways to think about that. But when you ask yourself the question, how might I be wrong? What did that feel like when you first asked yourself that question?
Well, my first answer is I can't be. I
Mhm.
mean, I've thought about it. I've gone 6 ways till Sunday to do it, and my opinion was based on, months of working with these people.
Yep.
But what I really concluded was the people that make me the most you know angry or upset with their opinion. I finally decided I really don't know them
Mhm.
even a little bit.
Mhm.
I think I know them, and I base my responses to them like I know them, but I really kind of figured, out that I really don't know them as well as I thought I did.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, Steve, your story, I think, is a great illustration. Um, I'm sort of imagining what it would feel like to be in the middle of that. And I can imagine how many times you must be feeling really triggered, angry,
Yep.
frustrated, all those things kind of stuck. And so when we can actually really use that question genuinely and really well, the how might I be wrong? What that is doing chemically in your brain is, I think I said this last time, it's allowing you to create possibilities instead of focusing your brain on probabilities. And when we focus on the probabilities, the brain tends to get narrow and try to find the one single answer or explanation. And when we open to the possibilities and we have those multiple things, chemically, what your brain is doing is it's pushing you into that more open state. And it's probably helping you regulate those emotional responses that you're having. So did you feel the anger and the frustration maybe a little less? Did it have less of a grip on you as you were able to ask those questions?
I you know when I looked at what do I know as a fact,
Mhm.
that's when I started, you know, truly softening up a little bit.
Yeah.
Because, although we've been fighting this battle for, 2 months now, um, the actual facts, there's some things I blame them for that was really beyond their control.
Mhm.
And so it just made me rethink,
Mhm.
still, you know, the issue is still we need to collect this money and we need to collect it soon. But the reality is once I tempered what their part is versus the insurance company or some other party, um, it just kind of made me think I need to develop my strategy on what they can control and only that as opposed to the whole mess.
Yeah. 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 So I love the story because I think what you're illustrating is how your ability to kind of zoom out, I'll just use that language and notice your thinking and be able to shift into a different set of questions. It can shift not only the outcome, but also your experience along the way. But my observation is when we can do this, and this is why I keep coming back to this over and over again as a core leadership skill, this ability to zoom out and look at your own thinking and shift it. Um, this is, I am convinced, one of the most, if not the most important skill that we can develop as leaders. No one can design your thinking except for you. And so mastering this ability is really where it's at. Anybody else have an experience or a story that you're willing to throw out there about the last few weeks? What you've noticed? Nobody? I got a call the other day from a client who said, hey, I really just need to ask you to help me think through something a minute. So we hopped on the phone and he said, okay, I'm going to be honest, this isn't necessarily work related, but it kind of bleeds into work. And he said, what I'm finding is I don't know how to be with some family members that are on the opposite side of the spectrum of me politically. And things have been so heated, I'm finding myself not liking them, not wanting to be around them because I don't understand them. And, you know, anybody have that experience? Just wave your hand if you've thought about that, felt it at all. You know, that's where I think some of these skills really come into play too. You know, how could I be wrong? And especially when it comes to things that polarize us so deeply. You know, we all think that our perspective politically is the right one, and the people on the other side just don't get it. So, you know, I think mastering this can really make such a difference in how we have difficult conversations. You know, as Steve's story illustrates, how we negotiate things. Just really simply the amount of cortisol that is dumping into your brain every single day. So these traps, I think, they're biggies, and they may seem on the surface really simplistic, but at the end of the day, this is really hard work. So I want to start what we're talking about this morning with a little poll. I'm going to launch this. So I want you to do this very quickly. Read the description of these two guys really quickly. Don't overthink it. Who would you rather have dinner with? I'm going to give you less than 30 seconds. So just quickly, first blush, who do you want to have dinner with? Okay, hurry in, everybody. Don't overthink it. I'm going to give you 10 more seconds. All right. Can you all see the results? So 89% of you said Ted. All right. Who picked Ben?
I did.
Who was that?
I did, Jeff.
And why'd you pick Ben?
It seemed like Ted was on the surface. It's the order of where intelligence, industriousness showed up. On the surface, he was that way. And then, you know, I think that things are listed typically in the order of how they appear. And so Ben buried under the surface. You had to dig into Ben to get to the industriousness and the intelligence.
Interesting. Yeah. Did you all notice that these are the exact same qualities, just in different orders? So this is actually an interesting little exercise that has been used in studies of people over and over and over again. And your results, 89% of people choosing TED, is very consistent with any population that this is put in front of. And this is sort of basic neuroscience. Today, we're going to be talking about simple stories as a thinking trap. And we're going to talk about how we as human beings are wired up to create stories about people, about things, about circumstances, about our context, and how quickly we do it. And so the majority of you probably picked Ted because that first quality was was really the most positive one, right? Intelligence. Basic neuroscience, there are almost 180 known biases that we are all subject to in our thinking. We're going to talk about a couple of them today, but this little exercise just showed one of them, where we tend to create stories based on very limited information that we have. And we create these stories, and then we attribute all sorts of things to them. So just as a reminder, these are the thinking traps that we've been talking about. And we started by talking about agreement and how there are times where being in agreement about things is exactly the right thing. When a problem is simple or even a complicated problem, to come to agreement is a very helpful and useful thing, and helps you move things through things very quickly and get to decisions, solve problems well. But when things are more complex, sometimes that human desire to be in agreement, not stick your neck out there and be the one who has a different story, can be exactly the wrong thing and can get us into trouble. Same with rightness. There are times, 1 + 1 = 2, right? You don't need to overthink that. You don't need to stop and go, what are the other possibilities? Maybe I'm wrong. There are times where that's really useful to know the answer to something. The problem is we get so addicted to that sense of being right. And we're in such a hurry to solve our problems. This is about context, you guys. This is about, as leaders, having the agility to choose your thinking. And so, like we just talked about, there are times where, like in Steve's story, the simple parts of that situation, having a sense of being right and knowing what is right or wrong could be very useful. And there are other parts of this problem that are more complex. And in that, falling into the trap of rightness can actually get him more stuck, make things take longer. And so the path to efficiency is actually being able to get himself out of the trap of rightness. Today, we're going to focus on this trap of simple stories. And this is really just about how we as humans, our brains are wired up. You've heard me say this a bunch of times, to be very efficient machines. Your brain does not want you burning more calories than you need to on any particular kind of thing. So our brains are wired up to create really simple stories all the time out of the information that we have. We do it all day long, all the time. And we couldn't honestly really function if we couldn't do this. This is a really important thing as humans. And again, when problems are really simple, this is helpful. When things are complicated, this can be helpful. But when things are more complex, this can actually be the very most wrong way of thinking. So as we tell stories, here's the thing. What we're doing, what our brains are doing, are really 3 things. Our brains are creating a sense of character all the time. So even in that quick little thing that I just put in front of you, those 2 guys, you create little stories about them. So Jeff, you had actually quite a story about that guy, right? Look at how fast you created a story about a person that's not even real. So we do that. We create characters. And if we think about the drama triangle stuff, we actually assign a role to those characters almost always. And we may not realize we're doing it, but in our mind, as we create stories, especially about other people, in our stories, they are victim, they are villain, they are hero. Sometimes they are creators, they are challengers, they are coaches. So it just depends on how we're constructing this quick little story. Interestingly, one of the other things that we do, and one of the other reasons that we do this as human, this is our sort of protective mechanism, or way our brains are designed to help us, is we use our stories to assign cause and effect. So, Steve, in your story, probably some of the stories, at least at first, that you had created about the people you're negotiating with, explained why things were happening that way. Right. So we're in a situation with someone, things aren't going the way we want, and we quickly tell ourselves, well, this guy is just an asshole who is trying to make my day miserable. Okay, I have just assigned him a sense of character. He's a villain. And cause and effect, the reason things are bad is because he is a bad person. Cause, effect. How could it go any other way? He's a jerk. So we do this very, very quickly. Our brains love cause and effect equations. And we have a tendency to use the past to project into our future, to see the future, to predict what's coming next. Our brains, remember that certainty thing our brains like? We want to know what's happening next. Of course, we can't ever know what's happening next, but we almost always think that we do. So we tell ourselves stories, and what we don't realize is these stories are actually coming from data from our past experience. And it is unbelievable what our brains can do. Have you ever had an experience where you met somebody for the very first time and they reminded you of somebody else you know? Instantly, like they look like that person, they felt like that person. Have you all had that experience? Raise your hand if you have. Nobody has ever met a person who reminds you of someone else. You know what I'm talking about, right? Yes, thank you. Okay. If that person that they remind you of is someone that you don't like, how are you likely to interact with this new stranger?
Well,
Steve,
Shut
was
him
it
out.
you? Somebody.
Shut him out.
Did you say shut him out, Todd?
Yeah, mentally you're going to shut them out of
Yeah.
who they are. If they're reminding you of someone that is not particularly of a good character in your own mind, you're going to shut them off in your own mind.
Uh-huh. Uh-huh.
Especially if they're ex-boyfriends, Todd, let me tell you. They really start playing.
Uh-huh.
That's what comes to front and center.
And what about the opposite? They remind you of somebody that you're crazy about.
Open arms.
Of course. And it can happen just like that. A couple years ago, I was facilitating this group of people, and there was a guy in the group that was a dead ringer for a cousin of mine who had died. He was my age. We were raised like twins. I loved him. He died when we were 36. And it was like, took my breath away. He looked so much like him. And I found myself feeling like Todd was in the room. And I found myself like drawn to him, wanting to look at him more than other people, smile at him. And I went up to him at the first break and I said, okay, I just have to tell you that you look so much like a relative of mine who passed away and I really miss, that if I look at you really weird, please don't think I'm creepy. I'm trying not to. But my brain is doing this. It's so powerful. It's like I just couldn't stop. I couldn't help myself. I had told this whole story about this person, and I was projecting my experience with my cousin onto this complete stranger. It's just a natural, very human thing that we do. And we do it all the time. And it complicates how we navigate through these relationships, through these decision-making processes, through problem solving, through creative or difficult conversations. And if we don't have the awareness to see that what we're doing is our brain is quickly constructing a story, and then as we believe the story and we act on the story, we're actually responding to the story and we're becoming a character in our own story without even realizing. Does that make sense? Can you kind of see how easily this happens? So read this story quickly on the screen, and then I'm going to ask you a couple questions about it. Y'all got it? All right. First impressions, don't overthink it. Don't try to get this right. Just first impressions. What are some of the things you think about this story? What's the narrative that you created in your head about this boy?
Well, I think the principal should be fired.
Okay. What else? Jansen, how about you?
I think he's a pretty independent person.
Okay. Thank you.
It doesn't say where he's from, but I think it's kind of odd that he ended up in Nicaragua and New Zealand. And I'm wondering if like he was getting away from that principal and what the principal said about him, and that he had to go far away to, you know, accomplish his goals. And I also think it's interesting that it says he got his PhD, but then also says he worked in an appliance factory, that even though he got the PhD, maybe he still didn't feel that he was capable of using it. And that, you know, principal really had a negative impact on his self-esteem or how he viewed himself. He could have worked in the appliance factory while he was going to get his PhD to pay for it.
I think he wants to have dinner with Ted.
So do you see what you've done? Do you see what you are doing with this story? What your brain is doing is a couple things. One, when our brains construct stories, your brain wants a beginning, a middle, and an end. And so we tend to construct an order of how things go. And so your brain, like my brain, probably wanted the beginning of this to be the beginning of the story and the end of this paragraph to be the end of the story. We tend to want to construct things beginning, middle, and end. And so you probably, unless you had enough time, and I gave you, an extra minute or so, and some of you did this, started to question, do I have the order of this right? Do I know what the beginning is? Do I really know what the end is? But your brain really wants there and needs there to be a beginning, a middle, and an end of a story all the time.
Hey, Denise, I'm gonna kind of be the counterculture here, but how come nobody said maybe this principal actually has the proper vision of this student and isn't directing him not towards education, but towards a better plan? Everybody jumps on the principal. I'm thinking maybe there's wisdom in his words. Those were my initial reaction.
Yeah, so that's sort of the next thing is we assign character. So how many of you thought the principal was a villain?
Marty.
Yeah.
Yes.
And so therefore, how many of you, in at least as you started reading this story, started to assign the boy into the role of victim? If you're honest, did you notice that your brain started to do that? Anybody? A little bit? Yeah. By the time you got to the, well, let me ask it this way. Was there another point in the story where that started to shift and you started to see him more as another role?
Maybe the hero.
Yeah. Yeah, that PhD line for me was like, oh, that just changed how I think about this boy.
Yeah, but he got it in art history, Denise. So, you know, it's a waste of time if you look at it.
Now, Todd, there's a story.
I side with the principal.
Yeah. So do you see how easily we do kinds of things? So yeah, the little bits and pieces of information that we have, we all, based on our own context, our own experience. So Todd, to you read this story one way.
The right way. I mean, I'm right? Isn't that what we're talking about? It's the right way.
How could you be wrong though, Todd? I saw this more of like the first sentence made me go, okay, never happened. It's as if it's a Facebook post where somebody says, here's to all the people that said I could never do it. Nobody really said that. Like nobody really says, principals really don't say this stuff. Doesn't happen.
I don't know, Jeff.
I know that's I'm speaking. That's a conclusory and statement, but
Yeah, actually, oops, what just happened? Did my screen just go away?
Yes, the share screen.
I've got the technology gremlin this morning. I'll go back to it in a second. So yeah, Jeff, that's interesting. I started homeschooling my kids back in the day because I got called in for a meeting with the principal, my son's teacher, and the social workers, and they told me that he was never going to pass a high school English class. And so they were going to put him on a different path and not even expect him to do
is
that.
this a public school with a teachers union?
Uh-huh.
Yeah, okay. So,
yeah, I was so pissed off that I pulled him out of school and homeschooled him. By the way, he has a PhD now.
You live in Nicaragua and a little longer in New Zealand, walking two dogs through the hills?
Yeah, this is actually my son's story. No, kidding.
He got a Maytag shirt. It's great.
Volunteering at a museum, talking about pictures on a wall.
So are you guys kind of getting where I'm going with this, at least? You know, how quickly our brains want to create simple stories about things. And look, this, in a lot of situations, this is useful. Our brain is designed this way for a reason. It helps us to be more efficient. It helps us to assimilate our experiences in useful ways to help us solve problems and make decisions. And it can really get in our way. So there's just back to some of the neuroscience of this and some of the biases. We could actually do this for half an hour or more hours, go through all of the different biases that we are subject to as human beings and how they play into this, but just a couple. Are any of you familiar with something called confirmation bias? You know what that is? Okay, Jeff's nodding. What is it, Jeff?
It's where we tell and shape a story, and we only accept information and news that'll bolster what we see as a preconceived notion or a fact.
Yeah. Yeah, we are wired up to be biased toward information that confirms what we already believe. And man, this can be in a positive or negative way. You know, if I believe that something is going to hurt me, if I believe this bug is going to hurt me, when the bug jumps, oh, see, it's dangerous. You know, when I believe that someone has a negative characteristic, no matter what they do, to me, that's just confirmation that that's true. There have been numerous studies that have been done. I might have even referenced this with you guys before. They're so interesting to me, where they'll take groups of people that are super polarized on an issue, like politically, you know, a group of extreme right, extreme left, and they'll give everybody an article to read, and they'll ask the question, you know, what did this article have to say? And pretty much everyone says, see, the article proves my side. And the thing is it's exactly the same article that all of the people are reading. And so we have a tendency to take information that is itself often neutral and tell ourselves the story that it confirms what we already believe. And like you said, Jeff, remember last time when we were talking about that set point thing? This is the set point in action. Once you set on a belief, your brain is designed to freeze on that belief and blind you and deafen you to any disconfirming information. It is incredibly hard to change our minds about a lot of things. This bias really gets in our way. Another bias, and this is actually what we were playing with in that little poll that we did at the top of the class. It's called attribution theory. Anybody know what that is? Attribution theory, or attribution bias is when we take one little bit of data and we extrapolate that out and attribute behaviors and effect to one little bit of information. So there's another exercise that I wanted to do with you guys. If we had been in person, we would have done it that way, but I'll just describe it. It's very similar to that little poll that I did with you, where I'll hand a group of people a sheet of paper, and it has a paragraph that describes a person. And then underneath that are two columns with sets of polarities. And the exercise is, after you read the paragraph that describes the person, go through here, and they're all lists of traits that are opposite of one another, and ask yourself, which one is this person? Is she generous or stingy? Is she fun or boring? Is she smart or slow? And there's like, I don't know, 20 different sets of polarities that way. And so then I'll say, okay, everybody will go through each of the sets of answers. Everybody who said that she was fun, get on this side of the room. Everybody who said she's boring, get on this side of the room. And we go through all of them. And what you find is that the room is evenly divided, positive, negative. And after we do the exercise, it's then revealed that half of the room, that it's the exact same paragraph of description with one word difference. Half the room, the description started by describing her as warm, and the other half of the room, it started with describing her as cold. And everything else is identical. And this is a really old exercise in attribution theory. I've been using it for probably close to 30 years now. And the same thing happens pretty much every time. We tend to attribute positive characteristics to somebody that we think is warm, even if it's the only real thing that you know about them, and negative to somebody that we think is cold. So Steve, in your story that you told at the top of the class, what were some of the initial impressions that you had about the people that you're negotiating with?
They were cold.
Mhm. And can you see how anything else that you experienced with them extrapolated out from that perspective?
Oh, absolutely. I mean, you can play almost everything based on the initial impression.
Mhm. So I'm going to pop you guys into breakout rooms for a minute, about 5 minutes. And I want you to digest this together. Ask yourselves the question, in what ways do I tell myself simple stories? And what are some times when I'm in a situation that is actually complex that I can get caught in this trap of telling myself simple stories? And what happens as a result? So I'm going to pop you into a couple rooms. I'm going to give you about 5 minutes to just talk about how this shows up for you, and then we'll come back and talk a little bit more about it. Bridget and James, are you still in?
Knew that he was going to do his own independent evaluation of people without other interference. And even if he got the other interference, for instance, he's a jerk. He's, the best person in the world. He's, great. He's lousy. He's whatever. I knew that he was going to, change the story based on what his opinion was. And to me, that was his highest quality. And that was something that just appealed to me, almost more than any other quality with him. I knew he'd be, he had integrity. I knew he'd be a good leader or whatever, but, I think I've got a lot of great people in my company. My biggest fear is somebody will make decisions about our people without really knowing who they are. And so, this is an interesting, exercise because I think, for me, this is probably one of the most important pieces of who a good leader is.
Mhm. Yeah. Steve, our brain constructs these simple stories. We can latch onto these stories before we even know that it's happened to us. And then we can hold those stories forever. They can be stories that shape how we see things over a long period of time. And sometimes it's just a quick thing. We create a story, it impacts our thinking for 5 minutes, we make a quick decision, and then we let go of it, and we don't even know that it happened to us. But as you just said, as leaders, if we don't have any awareness of this, we're in the trap. We're subject to those stories. Those stories are in control. They're in the driver's seat. We are not. Your story reminds me of something that happened for me years ago. I was hired into a role where I had a lot of direct reports, and the person who hired me said, hey, by the way, I think I'm going to go ahead and fire Michelle before you come in. She's just going to drive you crazy. And I'm just going to go ahead and fire you before you get started. And I said, you know, why don't you just give me a chance and see if I can lead her, and, you know, see if, because she's got a good track record of high performance, I think. And, you know, let's just see what we can do. So I go in, I start working with her. Months later, I'm like, oh, I should have let him fire her. She just is a thorn in my side. And then it occurs to me, I had adopted the story. She's a problem child. And everything she said and everything she did went through that filter. And when I was able to stop and say, okay, how could I be wrong? How could this story be wrong? I actually had to sit her down and tell her the story that I was holding. And we had a great conversation about it. And we ended up working together for years. And she was indeed a tough employee. She needed a lot of attention, and she outperformed a lot of people in some areas in some really good ways. But man, was that story strong, and man, was it hard to change.
How was it initiating that conversation, Denise? Because that's what we fear, is having those hard conversations. What do you recommend on that?
Oh, that's awesome. So this might sound a little kind of, I don't know, woo-woo for lack of a better word, but I find that the phrase, the story I'm telling myself, is incredibly powerful. You say it to yourself, you can say it to another person. I've been practicing this for a number of years now. And I don't know if I told you guys this story before, but I hired an employee a couple of years ago, and I would walk in the morning. It was her job to be there really early and get things set up. So she was almost always there before me. And I would walk in and I'd say, good morning. And she'd look down, go, good morning. And after like the third day, I noticed that every morning when I walk in and she did that, what went through my head is, she hates me. She hates it here. She's not happy. She's going to quit. And I started laying awake at night. Oh, I'm going to have to hire a new person. What did I do? Losing hours of sleep. And then I catch myself. Okay, what's the story I've just told myself? How do I, how could I be wrong? So I go to her and I said, I need to tell you that when I walk in the door in the morning and I say hello, and you look down and say hello quietly, the story I tell myself is that you hate it here, or that you don't like me. And she instantly, her eyes got really big. She got really panicked. She goes, no, no, no. I'm so scared that I'm not doing things right. Every time you walk in, it just makes me so nervous. And what was actually happening was her desire to get it right, and liking her job already so much caused her behavior. And I had told myself a story about it that wasn't true. And so I was reacting to her, which was increasing her anxiety. And we were snowballing. So actually being able to surface the story sometimes is really useful. Now, of course, you have to filter. The story I'm telling myself is you are a complete jerk, blah, 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 may not be that useful, but sometimes it could be, honestly. Because we might have the beginning, middle, and end mixed up. We might have the cause and effect mixed up. We're attributing things that we may not know. There are the millions of ways as humans that we get it wrong. No. So Todd, to answer your question, I have found that that's the best starting place. And one of the things that I think makes it effective is that it's a creator move. Okay, it's a powerful move into being a creator and taking responsibility for my story. It's not blasting right in with what we think are facts. It's, I'm telling myself a story. Tell me how that lands for you. Is it, am I getting it right? How am I wrong?
Comes back to perception and intent, and this is a something that we've looked at, me and some of the others on the staff here. So the story I'm telling you is again, we go into that perception thing. Was that the intent? Are you perceiving what my intent was?
Yeah.
So I think I see that again at all levels here. I just think, how do you, when those are the things that bother us, because we perceive that this is your responsibility. We perceive that, is that the intent of what it is or not?
Yeah.
It's having those hard discussions at any level within this company without the fear of, what your job description is, the approachability of it. And how do you, I guess, maybe it's because we've perceived that this is not going to be received well.
Yeah.
And therefore we avoid it and boil in the bitterness and anger and fear. And I think as an organization to have, we'll just say the chutzpah to approach those within the organization without the fear of that being received in the wrong way. Now, if it is received in the wrong way, obviously it needs to escalate in a way to correct that in the proper way. But I guess it's, again, it's, I say this about myself, but I'm hoping others find this beneficial because I too fear the reaction of what people are going to take. And sometimes I come at it, I get angry, I get cynical, I get sarcastic, which is incorrect as well.
No.
But believe it or not.
Did you like that sarcastic response?
Yeah, I know, I caught it. I picked up on it. But I don't know. I think it's just, how do we as individuals care for each other in a way that allows us to have those difficult conversations? Because ultimately, when they're done and we've communicated, our relationship is only stronger. I'm just blabbing at this point right now, but I think you're kind of going down that road.
Yeah, Todd, what you are doing right now is honestly exactly what was hoping that you guys would get from this conversation. Is a new set of questions. How can we do this? How can we see the patterns that we have that get in our own way, that can sabotage us or slow us down? And how can we do things differently? And one of the strategies for these sessions is actually to give you guys common language to start these conversations, a reason to start the conversation, but also a starting place to see them, to notice them. And I think the mandate as leaders to take responsibility for some of these patterns and address them. There's a way that all of you being in this class right now, in this room, is almost a way of kind of making a pact together. Okay, we've all just had this conversation about how we as humans have this tendency to create simple stories, and that can really get in our way. That can slow us down and impact our relationships and decision making and all that. What are we going to do? Well, we need to be able to catch ourselves in creating these simple stories. And we often need to check in with each other. Okay, can we make a pact that if I come to you and I say, I've told a story about this is the story I'm telling myself, that you'll have the conversation with me and work on not being defensive or upset, help me look at my story differently? Can we all just sort of pinky swear, and make the pact that we're going to use this language together? Todd, I think in the years and years that I've been doing this, that's the best shortcut I know.
That's helpful. Thank you. Can't wait to see all the texts of people today sending me saying, hey, this is my story. Can I share?
clear your calendar for a couple days. But, Todd, that is so important, that question that you just asked. It is such a big deal, and I'm so glad that you just said that. And as leaders in the organization, as an influencer, no matter where you are, and I am not talking about positional authority here. I'm talking about the reason that you're in this room right now is because you have a place of influence in this organization, no matter what you do. And as that influencer and leader, your thinking is your responsibility to yourself and to the company. To this organization, you have a responsibility as a leader to sort of master these things, to create more agility, have more tools in your toolbox so that you are doing the best thinking that you can do. And here's part of the bad news about this. Steve said a few minutes ago, I've hired really good people in this organization. I think by good, he meant a lot of different things. And I think one of those things is probably smart and competent. And here's the bad news. When you're smart, when you're competent, when you know your job, when you're committed to it, often you're a fast, confident thinker. And this, if you are that person, if you make quick decisions, if you make decisions with competence and confidence, this thinking trap is probably especially trappy for you. This is where your intelligence can actually not be your friend. You more than anybody else probably have to stop and ask yourself, how do I fall into this trap? When do I fall into this trap? How can I, and Todd, back to your question, maybe even ask others, give people permission to alert me when they notice me falling into the trap. And it's so familiar to me that I don't even recognize that I'm in it. Is there a trusted person that you work with a lot that you can say, hey, I know I have a tendency to fall into this trap in these ways, and probably ways that I don't know. If you notice it, would you give me, the high sign? The quote. Have you guys seen Ted Lasso yet? Anybody? Oh, it's the best show. There's this great scene where he talks about, the code word. When I'm talking to another person and I think they're giving me the old BS thing, they're not telling me the whole truth. Code word is Oklahoma. And I'll just stop myself and I'll look at them and I'll say, Oklahoma. And they have to tell me the whole truth right then and there. Do that with somebody. Have your code word. When you think I might be falling into this trap, Oklahoma. And that will alert me to check my thinking. Man, wouldn't that be useful? It's almost like having a spotter. When I fall into this little trap, hurry up and tell me I'm there before I even notice. So how's this landing for you guys? Are you guys resonating with this? Good. Okay. There's an exercise that I created, and I will send this to you in the follow-up email. And I'm just going to warn you, for some of you, you will probably look at this and go, I don't have time for that. But I just want to really attach this to what I just said. Some of you don't have time to not do exercises like this. And the exercise is designed to start training your brain to do something different. So the exercise, it's kind of a storytelling exercise. And basically what it is when you catch yourself in a simple story, especially if it's a story that you like, especially if it's a story that's useful to you, that helps you in some way, you're gonna look at what the story is as a story. You're going to look at the beginning, the middle, the end, and you're going to change one of those elements. You're going to mess with the story. You are going to see what the end result or the effect of the story is, the outcome, and you're going to change that, and then you're going to work backward from there. You can do this in 5 minutes. You're going to need a pencil and paper to do it. And again, I know you guys are all busy and you're mostly going to think, I don't have time to do something like this. Our brains, you guys, they are hardwired to this stuff. You are not going to change these patterns of thinking by hoping that they will change. It's probably not useful either, just to wait for everybody else to do this. This is an all play. So my challenge / assignment for you today is experiment with the little exercise that I'm going to send you, please, at least one time, and see what happens. Also, notice when these simple stories are showing up for you. So, you know, in Cam's example earlier, she was talking about how she can notice it in others. And it's harder to notice it in yourself. Often a really quicker way to start noticing it in yourself is to look for the little things, like the stories that are a sentence long. He's such a jerk. She doesn't like me. I can't do this. I don't have time for this. Often our stories appear to us in a single sentence, but they're actually big stories. So see if you can catch those little stories, write them down, start to make a list of those simple stories you catch yourself in. I could give you lots of examples of how quickly and easily this happens. As I've been preparing for this session with you over the last week or so, I have, because it's brought my brain to more awareness, I can't tell you how many times I've caught myself over and over and over. It happened like 3 times before I started the class this morning. Like your brain just always wants to do it. So jot it down. Notice, get with your learning partner, have a conversation, talk about the way those stories pop up for you and what you're doing to kind of hold them less tightly. How does that sound? You willing to try it? Awesome. Anybody have any last thoughts or words of wisdom? Todd, is that you coming in? No? All right. Well, it was great to see you all. And I hope you stay warm and stay connected. Have fun. The next time we see each other is going to be March. This winter thing will be almost over. All right, Steve, any last words from you?
No, I thought this was fantastic. I think there's a lot of simple stories that we grab that and we change everything else that happens after that many times, and we're not even aware of it. But the key ingredient is, I think we live those stories for much longer than we think.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, they could go on for years because of the first impression or the first, what somebody told us about somebody else. And I think it's key to really put an end to it and start afresh in
Mhm.
order to really come to a new reality with every individual.
Fantastic. Well, experiment away and let me know how it goes. Let me know if you need anything. And I'll be wanting to hear your stories.
Thank you.
All right. Bye, everybody.
Thank you.
Thanks for being here.